Welcome everyone. Welcome Laura, Anna, and Robert. Welcome at the panel discussion. Sustainability issues continue to evolve in the beauty industry. We've heard very interesting talk on this topic today. And traditionally, operators have focused on environmental impacts. However, the pandemic is making health and social impacts more prominent. So, in your opinion, this is a question for you, our panelists. So, what sustainability issues are becoming more important, and why? And how has the pandemic changed the way operators, stakeholders in the industry approach sustainability? Who would like to start? Laura, go ahead. You muted.
There we go. Hopefully you can hear me now. Okay. Second mute button, like I have a hidden one. It's never a good thing. I should just stick with one and keep it simple. But good question. You know, I think, and I got a question similar to this in the panel or the discussion that I gave earlier as well, which was, you know, what changes to the Conscious Beauty at Ulta Beauty program have we seen from COVID? And I think, you know, there's a couple of things that come to mind. I mean, I think one, you know, in the pandemic itself, in addition to the focus that we saw our consumers and our guests placing on clean and sustainability within cosmetics and within beauty overall, we saw an increased emphasis, of course, on safety as well, which I think overlays kind of nicely into these topics. I think the more interesting question is kind of now what do we see? Kind of now, hopefully, knock on wood, right, in some areas of the world, at least starting to emerge from the pandemic. You know, what does that look like? Excuse me. And I think, you know, we're seeing traction in additional areas like packaging sustainability really take the forefront. And I'm going to cough again, so I'm going to turn it over to somebody else. Hold on.
I can jump in. I would agree with what Laura was talking about. You know, packaging has been a really recent trend that we've been seeing uptick. I talked about it in my presentation. Plastic free has just really accelerated over the past few quarters. But, you know, it's interesting that you bring up COVID because we, you know, at Neilsen IQ, we had been keeping track of the clean and sustainable trend for a few years now. You know, it's been a big topic. We weren't sure what was going to happen during COVID. You know, we thought maybe people would kind of move on and move to something else. And we were really surprised how even throughout the whole pandemic, consumers were really still looking for clean and sustainable products. And the demand has really only increased. And then you brought up a little bit about wellness too. You know, we've seen like vitamin sales have increased a lot. You know, and even seeing some of these sustainable trends move over to more of the health side. So with medications and, you know, clean vitamins. So it's really all encompassing. And I think it's really here to stay. I think it's going to keep growing.
Thank you. Robert?
I've seen it's more from the packaging side and less from the actual bulk is where I see more, and I've seen more an uptick when it comes to packages with less touch. Is one example, such as airless, where a customer isn't able to touch it, they dose. Which has caused a drop in some areas for jars where you can scoop it up and things like that. But I'll be honest, I think people are still trying to really figure it out as to how far they want to go. Because in the very beginning, it was, there's going to be a robot on the counter that goes and shoots it out at you. It went that far. So I think we're still trying to figure it out. But the sustainability side, I think when it comes to the materials used, has been the biggest push of all. And I think that the great part is it's consumer driven. They're the ones demanding it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Laura, would you like to add something? Or?
Yeah, and sorry, I didn't want to do that in front of everyone. I have a bunch of young children at home, and so they love to share their germs all the time, and thankfully it's not COVID, so that's always good. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think, retailers are deciding exactly how far to go. I think consumers are also, well, I think they're demanding it. I think they haven't also quite settled on a model in terms of how far they want to go. So, I think for retailers, what makes it really exciting for like us is we get to try different things. We're experimenting with partners like Loop, that I talked about earlier today. So circular platforms, certainly refillable beauty is becoming a little bit more prevalent. The brands are investing in. But ultimately, I think, what'll pan out and how it'll play out is basically what are consumers willing to do? Are they really willing to change their behavior to a degree to really adopt refillable beauty, at scale? Or are there different ways that retailers and brands can embed kind of the sustainability within the current purchasing pattern that consumers have today?
Yeah, I'd say reuse and refill or refillable. We launched our refillable jar and airless just before COVID. So that kind of stunk. But what I'm really happy to see is that there's actually more talk about it besides me or the one other person. You're seeing more articles, more packages are being innovated. I really also the other thing too is I've noticed pearls and powder has jumped in the ability to how to dose that effectively, where you're not touching it until it's in your hand. Those are some of the other things I've really seen a big jump in.
Thank you. We have a question from Amanda. Can someone speak to the formal production lines needed to run different clean packaging options and how those costs differ from what is the market on the market? My company wants to do away with plastic, but isn't sure how much of investment this will be for our older production lines and buildings. Anyone?
I can speak to from the manufacturing side of packaging. We've done quite a bit. We've installed new water purification systems, so it's closed loop. We have 10% of our power is coming from solar panels. But when it comes to inside the building and what we're dealing with when it comes to, say, materials, there's definitely a learning curve. No matter how much you think you know about a recycled material, there's something new. And right down from the manufacturing to the decoration of it. And that's where when I spoke in the last conference, I was talking about the material and where you get your materials from is just as important in understanding what it is, how it was utilized, what you're really, really getting before it ever walks in the door. Because there's some that are saying it's PCR, but it's really PIR. Are they actually testing it? Every lot for food contact. Those are little expenses to ensuring that your lines are set up correctly when it comes to being able to decorate post-consumer materials. We've had to invest quite a bit of time, energy, as well as equipment into being able to handle these things from our side.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add some comments? Okay. We have another question. Do you think consumers care more about sustainability when it comes to the packaging or the raw materials going into formulation?
I can start that one off.
Okay.
I think that's kind of a tricky question. I think some are going to care about both. Some might care about one or the other. It's sometimes we get consumers who are thinking about one certain buzzword, and maybe it's biodegradable this week, and then maybe next week it's paraben free. I think what we always tell our clients is to really, you need to define your brand and what you stand for. And I think those specific terms become less important if, you stand for, maybe you're a vegan brand and a cruelty free, and then everything else kind of falls into place. But I think the reality of it is with clean beauty is that some of the ingredients, it's getting a lot better, but sometimes the ingredients just don't work as well. as the stuff that we used to use. I think there's been a lot of progress made there, but for some consumers, performance is the most important thing, right? So if the clean lipstick doesn't perform as well as the conventional lipstick, they don't really care about all the environmental benefits. And it really depends how your brand is positioned too, right? A mainstream brand is going to have a very different, need to take a very different stance on that than a small kind of niche, more natural brand. So not a great answer, but I think there's a lot of nuances there. I'd be happy to talk with you further if you wanted to brainstorm.
Mm-hmm. Would you like to add anything, Robert?
Yeah, I'll add something. I mean, I think it's a really good question, and I agree with you. I mean, I think on an individual consumer basis, what we're seeing as well is like there are attributes that are important. They aren't all necessarily equal when you get down to the individual consumer level. I would say, however, overall, I definitely think the industry is moving to a place where both are more equally important than they ever have been in the past. I think consumers are moving to a place where it's everything. You can't have just clean formulations with, packaging that isn't recyclable, for example. It doesn't make sense to a lot of the consumers that we're seeing, and we're seeing it play out in our partner at Credo a little bit and in their guest that shops there. And I think that'll become a trend that we see over the next couple of years.
From my side, the majority is the material recyclable, and can we incorporate recycling?
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing that's asked. The next thing that's asked is how can we make it lighter, better, in a sustainable aspect. That's been driving me for 3 years now. And every one of our innovations in the last 2 years have been specifically about getting rid of one and done and trying to limit the impact of packaging, because everything's put in a package. I mean, look at grocery bags, the plastic bags. They're still around. Okay, how many people are still bringing their bags? It's grown, but it's the consciousness. And I think in some of the things I was talking about, there's also a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about sustainability and what it really is, because they think like I was pointing about bioresins or bioplastics. So many of them, they think you can throw it in the yard, put some dirt on top, and it goes away. It's just not true. Or if I throw it in the water, it'll magically melt. It's just not true. And that's where we have to educate the consumers as well. Because if we don't educate them, they're going to keep saying the same thing over, but it's not going to actually change anything in the end, which is what I think they really want, which is to quit polluting the planet and quit putting things maybe that hurt their skin or body that shouldn't be there. So that's education, I think, is the most important thing I can do for our clients when I speak to them.
Thank you. There's another question from Christine. Do you think there is a general belief about certain sustainable packaging materials that might not be considering the overall impact and footprint of manufacturing the packaging? Paper versus plastic versus aluminium, etc. Who would like to start? Yeah, Robert?
I think there's misconceptions and beliefs that are misconceptions in that area. Every single one of the ones named are not evil. I think there's a habit that we tend to say plastic is evil, or this is evil, so we don't want to use it, or that corporation is evil because they use that kind of material. It's more about what are we doing with what we have, our resource. It's so simple that is, how do we treat it when we get the resource, and how do we treat it when we're done with the resource? That's what, it's so simple, but it is very involved. We have to think before we do. And that's what I'm very afraid is going on with bioplastics, bioresins. And It's, oh, this is what's selling right now, sugarcane plastic. So everybody switches to that, but they're not thinking of the consequences. It's about what is easy at the moment.
Thank you. Would anyone like to add any comments? No. Okay. We have some more questions in the Q&A box. In your opinion, do you think the shift towards online retail, I think we saw that during COVID, will have positive or negative impact on sustainability and, let's say, the footprint?
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
Yep.
Who would like to start?
Go ahead, Anna.
Yeah. No, I think it's going to have a positive impact. You know, we actually have talked a lot to consumers about why they like shopping online and why they, and of course, convenience is number one. But another big thing that's popped up is they like shopping there because they can understand more about the ingredients. There's a lot more space online to read all the ingredients. A lot of retailers, you know, Ulta is a great example, have badges, right? So this is vegan or this is biodegradable, and you can't always get to that level of detail in store. And then also just, you know, there's limited shelf space online, right? But you can find whatever you're in store, but online you can find whatever you're looking for. So I think it just opens up a lot more opportunity, as well as, you know, we see that there's a bigger trend when people are searching online. They're for beauty and personal care products, they're searching unbranded. So they're saying, I want a lipstick that's vegan, instead of saying, you know, a brand name. So there seems to be a lot more openness to try things. So I think definitely it'll have a positive impact.
Thank you.
I think in terms of choice, absolutely agree with everything Anna said. I think when it comes to overall impact, that's where it gets tricky, right? And I think that's where retail is going to be really challenged to improve quickly on just broader sustainability. Continuing a trend, of course, that's been happening for a while, but I think the pressure is going to mount on that one as well as we shift more to omnichannel.
Thank you. Robert, would you like to add anything?
No, I think the ladies covered it really well.
Thank you. There's some few more questions. The UK has a tax on plastic bags. Is the government intervention needed in the US or North America?
It's needed globally. That's the problem, is we're not acting as one when it comes to these situations. I think they've tried to address that, but we need to act globally if we're going to do it. It'd be great if everybody played by the same rules.
Yeah, I'd say it's interesting, you know, one of the big, I think, lessons learned in the pandemic is when your back is up against a wall, like you innovate pretty quickly, right? And I think we saw that play out with the vaccines. I think the same could be said as an interesting forcing mechanism, Robert, to your point about the plastic bags.
Just taxing it does. You'd be surprised what a disposable society will take. Mm-hmm. You know, a nickel a bag. So what? That's what happens.
Yeah.
And they just pay.
In my town, they actually probably maybe 2 years ago, they put in a plastic bag. I think it's 5 cents a bag. People were up in arms about it, but I find it so interesting now because not everyone, but most people are bringing their reusable bags to the store. I mean, people complained about it for a solid 2 weeks, and then their behavior adjusted so quickly. So I do think there's a place for that. I was surprised how well it seemed to have worked.
Actually, I would like to add. So I think in the UK it was 5p the first year, and the usage of plastic bags went down by 80%. So it has a substantial impact. And now they increased it to 10p, and they expect even more declines. So yeah, it's definitely something tool that actually works.
An escalating tax does work because, in the beginning, the ones that really did the change were already doing it. And then the ones that don't have the budget, they start. But as it escalates to a point, it just becomes uneconomical. So that is a good point where it escalates, an escalating tax.
Mhm. Thank you. There's a few more questions. What is the panel's opinion on where the responsibility lies in educating consumers on the real impact of their decisions, whether the packaging they choose or the ingredients they gravitate to based on the current trends?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. So what is your opinion on where the responsibility lies in educating consumers on the real impact of their decisions, whether the packaging they choose or the ingredients they gravitate to based on the current trends?
I kind of think that's a self-answering question. It's up to the person to educate themselves. I mean, a company can only do or say so much to help, but if I make 100% recyclable package and they throw it in the woods, it doesn't do any good. So I mean, and you can tell them it's no good. I mean, how long, when I was a little kid, don't litter, but they still do. So I mean, it's got to be something that people are responsible as well for themselves. It can't be just a corporation or one particular company. We can help, but we cannot make them change. And that's where the government come into play.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else would like to comment?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do think you know, as a retailer, right, I think we do have a responsibility to educate the guests to the degree that they're asking for it, and they are, right? And so I think for us, we're seeing the demand for that education, which is why we have a responsibility to provide it in that space. However, completely agree with Robert that ultimately it is consumer driven.
We can help raise the consciousness of it, but and you know, that I think that's what we're trying to do, and it is in reaction to them, but we still that's not everybody, and it needs to be everybody to really make impact.
Thank you. Anna, do you have any comments?
I mean, I agree with Laura. I think retail has a big role that they can play in this, in educating consumers, and you know, really when they're in the store and they're kind of captive, there's a lot of work that can be done. You know, I also just see I think there's a lot of potential with Gen Z. You know, we hear a lot about how they're the most sustainably minded, the most environmentally focused. I think that they will do a lot to educate each other, their families, you know, people that they encounter on why this is so important. You know, we see a lot of really energizing things coming out of that group. So it'll be exciting as they kind of grow into the space and become more active consumers. I think they'll change things a lot.
Thank you. There's one more question from Damien. Is there a specific regulation, maybe in the US, North America, in progress relative to sustainability? Are you aware of anything like that?
No, we're terrible. I'll be honest, we're terrible. I'll give you an example. In my neighborhood, I have a green trash can and I have a blue one. Blue one is landfill, green one is for recycling. Okay, we're not going to even get into who's putting what in what can. Okay, they sent out a letter to everybody in my area. Okay, and the way it was worded, you didn't realize at first that they're not recycling anymore at all. I got 2 landfill trash cans now, and the part that kills me the most is the landfill truck still comes, but so does the big green recycling truck. So everybody's still walking around thinking it's actually being recycled when it's not. They quit recycling paper because it was too much of a pain. They all liked it when they could ship all the junk to China and let them use it. Okay. And now they actually have to invest in recycling it. And they're going, nah. So until our government officials are actually willing to do it, that's where we're going to see change, is when there's enough groundswell to force them to do it.
Yeah, there is some the FDA is looking into some sort of sustainability labeling right now. So, something similar to organic or non-GMO, but for beauty products. So I think that will help rather than, all these individual retailers having their own programs, having some sort of common language. So a small step, but could be helpful.
Thank you. I have one last question for you. What would you like to see in terms of future development in regards to in your sector in regards to evolution of sustainability agenda? Like closing remarks. Would you like to start, Laura, maybe?
I can. Yeah. I mean, I actually am going to pick up on something Anna just said, which is regulation, so we can get to a more harmonized answer. I think the lack of regulation has created the need for retailers to define terms a little bit more than I think we'd all like. And as much as I think that's a positive for transparency overall and a step in the right direction, I think ultimately to get to where we want to be, I'd want to see a more harmonized, definition, harmonized way we look at all of these terms across the industry for the benefit of the consumer. So for me, that's probably the biggest thing that I would hope over the next handful of years we can get to as an industry.
In clear language too.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
organic, I mean, I've seen Cool Whip, it says organic Cool Whip. I've never heard of such a thing in my life because they can get around it. I want clear language and innovation and defining what innovation is and actually utilizing and thinking about it, not just going, I can make anything out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Actually thinking about what you're doing before you do it.
Yeah, I'm excited about trying some of these reusable packaging options and refillable beauty. Definitely want to try the Ulta Loop partnership, see how that works. I think there's that could be a huge help, right? Reusing bottles over and over again, returning things when we're done with them instead of throwing them away. But again, it's getting people. It's not easy, right? It's harder than just buying something and throwing it in the garbage. So it's getting people to take that extra step. We'll see.
I disagree a little bit. I think our innovation has gotten rid of some of that confusion. It's easier to use. But I think where the problem is lying is for brands and companies like Ulta is how do I market refillable in that particular space? Refillable's been around for a long time. Go to the grocery store. You can buy a trigger sprayer Windex and you can buy the big gallon and a half. Nobody's confused on that, and they've been doing it for years.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to beauty, they're still trying to figure out how am I going to get my customer, my clientele to understand how we're doing refillable and how it's easy to use and utilize, and making it intuitive for the customer. Not something that they've got to figure out some puzzle how to do it. It's very intuitive. And I think that's very, very important. Is all of those things put together to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think too, the complexity in retail, omnichannel actually should help in that regard as well. When you think about historical limitations in the beauty space relative to the size of the box, right, compared to a grocer or other industries, it is limited. And so when you're talking about refillables and you're talking about multiple products to get to that refillable solution, the endless aisle online becomes a lot more appealing. And so the translation then to omnichannel is something that actually could really accelerate kind of that movement as well.
Good point.
Thank you everyone. I think now is the time to end the panel discussion. So thank you very much for your insightful answers. I invite everyone to join our open networking session with Laura. Otherwise, we are starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. New York time. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.